All right, Indiana escapes with a 77-76 win in overtime in Columbus, Ohio against Ohio State. I'm Jack Ankney with Indiana Hoosiers on SI, and there's a lot to unpack in this post-game reaction. Really a back and forth game with a ton of swings, um, but nevertheless, Indiana got out of there with a win. Any win in Big Ten play, coaches and players will say they'll take it no matter how they can get it. And with that win, Indiana improves to 14-5 overall, 5-3 in Big Ten play. Indiana travels to Northwestern on Wednesday before returning back to Assembly Hall to face Maryland. So overtime was pretty hectic. Really, the last possession, Bruce Thornton drove on Anthony Leal. Leal blocked the shot. Or sorry, that was Mobley that drove on Leal. Leal blocked the shot. Loose ball scrum. Bruce Thornton picks it up and actually got a really solid look at a last second three, and it just barely rimmed out to give Indiana the win. So pretty wild last possession, and Indiana did not get a great look on the possession before either. I was really surprised why they subbed out Miles Rice before Indiana's last possession with about 35 seconds left. They put Leal in the game and ran uh, a pick and roll with Galloway and Ballo, which was sort of what I expected Woodson to drop. He likes going to that pick and roll. And Ohio State defended it well, shut down the passing lane to Ballo, cut Galloway's drive off, and so Galloway sort of had to scramble, pass the ball away, and it led to a really tough look for Kane and Carlisle. At the end of the shot clock, and he missed. But Indiana's defense steps up, got the shot it needed to escape with that win. Um, Really a game with a lot of back and forths towards the end. Sort of in the first half, Ohio State led 35-29 at halftime. It didn't feel like Indiana was in a terrible position at that point, though it didn't play particularly well in the first half. Miles Rice, I think, only played 5 minutes in the first half due to foul trouble. But Umar Ballo is really good to sort of keep Indiana in the game. So, all things considered, a 6-point deficit, it sort of felt like it could have been worse, I thought. But in the second half, Indiana comes out, shoots the ball really well, 55% from the field, 50% on 4 for 8 from three. In the second half, Luke Goody was outstanding, a career high 23 points, 7 for 14 from the field, 4 for 7 from three, made all 5 free throws. He and Umar Ballo were really sort of the key players for Indiana tonight. Ballo, 21 points on 8 for 14 shooting, 15 rebounds. And Indiana had a chance there to win it in regulation. Or sorry, before we get to that, Goody and Ballo are really a big reason that Indiana sort of started to pull away. They took a 68-58 lead with about 4 minutes to go, and it sort of felt like Indiana was ready to sort of pull away and seal that victory. But Ohio State sort of ramped up the pressure. They forced a couple turnovers on the press. Trey Galloway had one that was pretty costly, trying to hit Rice, and Micah Parrish sort of just jumped in front of the pass and went in for a layup. Um, you know, Rice, I think, in the final minute took kind of a mid-range jumper that sort of felt like Indiana may have been able to get a better look. Galloway missed a three there down the stretch. So Indiana almost let it slip away, and that would have been a really painful loss. I was sort of thinking, man, how would that have stacked up with the Iowa and Illinois losses? And although it wouldn't have been by 25 points like those, it would have been really painful for Indiana, given that it had a 10-point lead with 4 minutes to play, and sort of let it slip away. But obviously they ended up, coming out with the win in overtime, so that's irrelevant now. But that was sort of just kind of the thought process there at the end. But Luke Goody at the end of regulation, drove and got a pretty solid look. It was contested. It would have been a really tough shot, but one that's certainly makeable. And it rimmed off. Balo was short on the tip in, got his own rebound and missed a second shot, which sent it to overtime. And at that point, it was like, man, you just let the 10-point lead slip away. You got three good looks, at least one really good look, arguably two or three really good looks there at the end of regulation and missed. Um, but you do just enough in overtime to come out with the win. Like I mentioned, Goody and Balo were huge in this game, especially with Miles Rice playing far fewer minutes than usual due to foul trouble. Um, Kanan Carlisle, I think if you look at this game on a whole, that was uh, one of his best games in an Indiana uniform. Rice only played 15 minutes. Carlisle played 36 minutes, scored 13 points. 5 for 12 shooting is not great from an efficiency standpoint, but had a couple and ones that were big. Also 2 for 5 from the line. I think he missed one there towards the end of either regulation or overtime that would have been big. Um, but I think this is a game that you could kind of view as a step in the right direction for Kane and Carlisle. They had big expectations for him coming in from Stanford as a transfer, and it really hasn't panned out. I think this is his only third game in double digit points after averaging like 10 or 11 points last year at Stanford. So it's taken him a while to sort of find his footing, but maybe Indiana could use this game sort of as a stepping stone for Carlisle to start putting together more consistent performances. Because they really need that from him. Mackenzie Mbako's struggles continued tonight, 6 points, 1 for 5 shooting. I posted at halftime that Indiana really had to get one of Carlisle, Mbako, or Galloway going because if you take the 3 games prior to today and then the first half of today, they were a combined 18 for 86 from the field, which is just barely over 20%. Those three players over the last 3.5 games before the second half at Ohio State. So Indiana was really not getting any production from them. So it was big that Carlisle stepped up there in the second half. This was a game that also had a ton of injuries and some lineup changes going into it. Malik Renew was out again after it sounded like Woodson was somewhat hopeful that on Tuesday that maybe Renew could give it a go, but he was out. Bryson Tucker popped up on the injury report. I saw Mike Niziolek from the Herald Times tweet that he had some sort of brace on his pinky at the game tonight. So we'll have to see, if there's an update on that. But then obviously Indiana still didn't have Gabe Cupps, who's out indefinitely. Ja'Kai Newton, um, you know, at this point probably isn't going to be counted on for big minutes just since he hasn't played much this year. Um, and then Ohio State didn't have Devin Royal, their sophomore power forward, who is their second leading scorer, leading rebounder. So that was a big loss for them, especially when you think of the way that Umar Bala was able to play tonight. Ohio State still also does not have Michi Johnson, who I think they're calling it like a personal leave of absence about a month ago. He'd been averaging about 9 points per game, so that was a big loss. So both teams kind of playing shorthanded, and Woodson sort of mentioned some potential lineup changes after the Illinois game, and what that turned out to be was Anthony Leal got the start instead of Trey Galloway tonight. So Indiana went Rice, Leal, Goody, Mbako, Balo. Ended up playing without Rice for long stretches because of foul trouble. So it was big that Goody and Kanan Carlisle stepped up in a big way tonight, and you got Balo to sort of, after kind of um, a little bit of a down game against Iowa and Illinois, kind of find the form that he had been rounding into in the stretch prior to that. So don't want to keep this too long, but big win for Indiana. They travel to Northwestern on Wednesday. One that's got to just feel good for the players after everything that happened Tuesday at Assembly Hall and the loss to Illinois with just the booing and just sort of all the negativity around the program after that loss. Not that this loss all of a sudden magically changes the outlook in a drastic way. But Indiana has to start somewhere if they're going to turn this around, and they certainly deserve credit for picking up this win, however narrow it was. Um, so I think we'll wrap it up with that. Like I said, Indiana 14-5, 5-3 over in the Big Ten now. They go to Northwestern Wednesday. I'll be there in Evanston at Welsh Ryan Arena for that game. Should be a good one. Northwestern got a big overtime win the other night. So that should do it for our post-game reaction video for Hoosiers on SI. I'm Jack Ankeny, and we will talk to you guys Wednesday in Evanston.